Rev Racing, it is a reputable, functioning, successful program. It goes to the racetrack. It runs well.
Yeah.
It wins races.
Yeah.
And it serves an incredibly important purpose in the NASCAR industry.
Yeah. I mean, they've won 2 or 3 truck races this year and half the cup races with their graduates.
Yeah, and they're creating opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about that. So as someone who has lived that program,
Mm-hmm.
right, talk about how important the purpose of that program is to give these drivers these opportunities.
It's everybody gets an opportunity, right? It's not just the drivers. It's a true development program. And, you know, if you go back to 2000, that program gave me an opportunity to be a crew chief, right? Like, I wasn't one, and we got that house car at Townsend, and I became one because of that program, right? So it's not just the drivers. I think, you know, whether it's the pit crew members or the people that work in the shop, you know, like Dylan Smith, Mamba, he wanted to be a race car driver, and he could do it, but it just didn't seem to be panning out the way he wanted it to. But we knew there was a place for him in the sport, so we made him a mechanic, and we taught him that and had him. He worked for me for years, and look at him now, right? Like it doesn't necessarily, and that was kind of the thing I tried to explain to every parent and every driver that came through there. Your place in the sport might not be in the seat, right? And maybe that was something that I learned from TJ, but there's a place for everyone here. You just have to find it, and depending on how hard you're willing to look is whether you'll find it or not.
How do you make the decision to leave?
It was tough. I had no intentions of ever leaving. Like I had seen it go from in debt to debt free. We won championships. We won races. Like, you know, along the way, I've been fortunate to win some cool stuff. But you go to South Boston and you win a late model stock car race with a 16-year-old girl that Philip Morris and Lee Pulliam and Peyton Sellers are all in that race, and you beat them. Like, it's fun. Like, it's fun to know that you provided an opportunity for somebody that was not there without the program and the people that work there. So I had started spotting more and more. I started doing it even before I moved to Charlotte, but it was just here, there, gigs. And Joey Meyer, somehow through our working together at DEI, he reached out and asked me if I wanted to start doing all the second spotting stuff with him. So it was with Brad, you know, Watkins Glen, Indy, whatever it was. That kind of parlayed into the one-off Xfinity races for Penske. So now I kind of had my foot in the door. Brad was actually really helpful with the program. You know, there was things he could donate that he would through his truck team, and he was big help. So like everything was going great. I was perfectly happy. Like I was getting to moonlight and do this stuff over here, and I felt like I was staying relevant in those garages and never wanted to become a full-time spotter. So like I didn't really have to worry about like trying to push my way through that pile. And it was just going well. And Travis Geisler called me one day, and he was kind of who like lined up the spot and stuff with. So, you know, I answered, didn't think anything of it. He wanted to talk, and there was some rumors going around that maybe Joey and Brad were going to go their separate ways. And I was like, oh boy, like I really don't want to be a full-time spotter, and I really don't want to upset Joey. Yeah. Like I would never do that. That was a tough conversation because Joey thought that I was, and he was pretty upset with me until he realized what was happening. But yeah, it started out like, I'm not going to burn a bridge, right? I'm going to go have this conversation. But this is not going to lure me away from Rev. Like we're winning, you know, big K&N races. I mean, we're winning at Dover and Loudon and like big places. Like, so he asked me to come to their bus at Charlotte in the infield, which Rev Racing is right behind the Speedway. So it was really easy. And I texted him and told him I was there, and he said, go on inside, walk straight to the back. There's an office in the back. I'll be there in a minute. So I sling the door open like I own the place, and RP standing there at the table signing champagne bottles from the Indy 500 win. I'm like, whoa. I don't think this is about spotting.
Yeah.
I don't feel like RP does the spotter interviews. So anyway, that's kind of how it came, and it wasn't about spotting.
What was it about?
They were looking for a team manager for their NASCAR side, and ultimately there's three of us. There's an IMSA version of me, there's a NASCAR, and then there's an IndyCar. And they were looking to, hire somebody for the NASCAR side.
Yeah.
So that was kind of what it was about, and it was still surprisingly. It was a very hard decision because it wasn't like every one of those employees at Rev, which Jimmy G was one of them, right?
Yeah.
Like your uncle was, he worked for me for 5 or 6 years, right? Like those were people I hired. Those were people that I gave my word that you're going to get paid and we're going to have fun and we're going to win races. I can't control that if I don't work there anymore. So like, there was a part of me that I felt like I was breaking that promise to them.
What would happen if you left?
What would happen if I left?
Yep.
Max and I had a partnership that's more like a brotherhood, and it still is. He never questioned a thing I did, and I didn't question anything he did. We had a plan. We stuck to it. We had provided a lot of opportunities, put a lot of pit crew members and drivers in the national level, and there was really no stopping it. So it was a tough decision.
Yeah.
And, lots of people were like, you're crazy. This isn't a tough decision. But they didn't know how emotionally connected I was to what Max and I were doing. So believe it or not, I called Kelly.
My sister.
Yeah. And, time heals everything, right? So, like, I remember who sat at the table when I didn't work at Junior Motorsports anymore. But enough time had passed, and I feel like her and I had some good conversations along the way, and kids that are similar age and just things. And I was like, I need to ask you something, and I know it's going to sound crazy, but I feel like her place in this sport, and her reputation for being brutally honest was it's what I needed. And I also know that she understands what it's like to be a female race car driver in this sport, right? So if anything was going to, tug on the heartstrings a little bit, it's that. So I knew I'd get the truth. So I laid it all out there. And she was like, "Are you crazy?" And I was like, "No, it's it's a tough decision." So I asked her, I said, "Let me ask you a question." At the time, Ryan Pemberton was here, things were rolling good, everything was great. And I asked her, I said, if Ryan came in tomorrow and turned in his notice and you had to make a list of people to interview to replace him, would my name be on that list? And she was like, "No." And I'm like, "Dang, I thought we had a history. Come on, you can at least put me at the bottom of the list, right?" And she was like, "No, I didn't even know this is what you did. I thought you were, I didn't realize you were running an entire organization, for our sanctioning body. It was way more than just racing.
Sure.
The relationships with NASCAR were the best thing that came to that program for me, really." And I said, "All right, well, what if I take this job? And then we have this same conversation in 3 years. Would I be on the list then?" And she was like, "Absolutely, top of the list. One of the top 3, no questions asked. Anybody that comes from Team Penske is top of the list." I'm like, "All right, well, there's my decision." Yeah. So I went home and was like, "Kelly said I need to take this job." And he was like, "Okay, this is what we're going to do." So, yeah.
How long have you been there?
This is 6 years, working on 6.
And what has all happened in the 6 years?
God, it's unbelievable, man. 2 Xfinity championships. So I think, I think that you and I have gotten along from day one because when you would come to Townsend, you were Dale's son, right? To a lot of the guys that worked there. I didn't care, right? I just wanted you to go home and say, "Man, there's this badass that works on late models in Richmond, and he should be here." And maybe that happened a couple of years later. Similar story happened with Austin. I had no idea who Austin Cendric's dad was. None. I spotted for Austin at all the non-companion truck races, and we were at Eldora for the truck race in the dirt. And we were going to leave there and drive to Indy to ORP to go. He was going to run an ARCA race the next night, and he asked me if we could take his dad to the racetrack, to Indy. I said, sure. So we're riding down the road. It's the middle of the night, and he asked me what I do, and I'm telling him all about what I do at Rev, and like super proud of myself. And I asked him what he did for a living. I had no idea, like none. And I think that's just like, you know, who I was, like, right? Like Austin was a good kid, and I wanted to be a part of what he was doing because I saw something there. He's extremely intelligent. But I didn't care who his dad was. And I think a lot of people maybe did. And I didn't even know. I had no idea. So that, like, I got to be there I was like Austin's first ARCA win, I spotted for him. Austin's first truck win, I was there. Austin's first Xfinity win, I was there, right? Like, got to see that. So it was like this development leg that I've found this niche in.
Yeah.
But man, since then, Daytona 500s, Indy 500s, Rolex 24s, like things that were completely unimaginable to a kid sitting in the wooden bleachers at Langley Speedway have happened.
Yeah. I remember coming to the Cup race and seeing you walking around in the pits wearing black slacks and a button-down white collared shirt with Penske on it, thinking, how in the hell?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, that is a long way from home.
It's a long way from home.
You know, your story is probably not unlike a lot of people in the industry, but it's an easier one to tell. And I think it does answer a lot of questions for people out there who are young, people that are that kid that you were when you were working over at Townsend's, wondering, man, how am I gonna, what is the path? Like, how do I get there? It seems impossible, improbable. I don't even know where to begin. And so I have such a hard time telling people how to begin, right? What to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, literally, man, I woke up and I was plugged in.
Right.
Because of who I am. When you get that question, how do I get into this sport? What is your answer?
It's tough. I think the first thing you have to make sure of is like, are you really willing to do the work? Or it's fun to talk about. It's not always necessarily cut out for everybody, right? We're gone a lot. It's a lot of hard work. You're probably going to get kicked when you're down, when you're vulnerable. And then when you least expect it, the most amazing things in the world are going to happen. But most of them, I mean, the simple answer is, you know, you got to go to a short track and you got to find somebody, right? Like, I was lucky. I found Rick. You know, Rick introduced me to people like Danny Edwards Jr. and people that were just local legends, and kind of, they didn't necessarily, they gave me confidence, right? Like, watching these guys. So that happened. So that's the simple answer, is you go to your short track. But nowadays, probably better start with college.
Really?
Yeah. I feel like those, you know, it's a pretty engineering driven sport. I think it helps a lot. I did not ever think that my college education was going to do anything for me, especially when I was hanging upside down in a roll cage welding it up at Townsend's. Like, what good is it there? But I feel certain somewhere along the line somebody at Penske looked to see if I was college educated, right? Like, so It did help. It just took a lot longer than I expected.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is, you know, it's the work ethic. Like, the people in this industry are the hardest working human beings in the country. Like, it is unbelievable the mountains that we can move. Like, you look at the way NASCAR adapted to the COVID situation, or the way, like, thousands of people in the middle of Los Angeles never blinked an eye when they were like, hey guys, we're going to race later today. Like, that wasn't on anybody's radar when we woke up that morning.
Yeah.
And
moved the Clash.
Yeah. And nobody cared. Like, it's just, okay, that's what we're going to do. Let's go do it. So that's the thing. Like, you just got to be willing to work hard. Yeah.
The sacrifice that you got to make. I love telling the story about a buddy of mine, Wesley Sherrill, who works over at Gibbs now. He wouldn't, Dad wouldn't hire him. All I needed Dad to do was give this guy a couple $100, right? Mm-hmm. And Dad would not do it. Dad said, hey, if you're here long enough to prove that you deserve it, you might get the job. And he literally had to work for more than a month without pay. Mm-hmm. And he kept coming back every day. And he's like, when do you think it's going to happen? I was like, I don't know, man, but don't give up. You're almost there. I can't even give you an answer when this might go right for you, but don't stop coming to work. And eventually it just clicked one day. Dad walks in and goes, all right, you're hired, you know?
Yep.
And I know that's probably not the way it's going to go for everybody, but I mean, you got to be willing to do something, do it for nothing.
Yeah.
Not for the money, right?
Right. I worked for 3 years for Rick for $6 an hour. Never got a raise. Not a nickel. Didn't think anything of it. Was just happy to clock in every day.
Yeah.
I hired a guy at Rev who's still there. Awesome. He was willing to do anything. And that came out of his mouth, and we were heading to Iowa. And I told him, I'm like, man, I need the help, and I think you'd be great, but all the plane tickets are bought and paid for, and there's no money left in the cookie jar. Like, if you want to go, if you want a job, when we get to Iowa, get in that truck, I'll see you there. And he did.
Damn.
That's how bad he wanted to do it, and he's still employed there.
Yeah.